Let me ask you something, and I need you to really think about this before you scroll past. What kind of company fires one of its biggest stars for doing exactly what that company trained him to do? What kind of authority figure sits behind a desk, puts on a suit, and decides that a man who has bled, broken bones, and sacrificed his body for this company 4 years deserves to be thrown out like yesterday's garbage? Because that is exactly what Nick Aldis just did to Drew McIntyre, and I am not okay with it. And if you're a real wrestling fan, you shouldn't be okay with it either. Drop a comment right now. I want to know, do you think Drew McIntyre deserved to be fired? Because by the time this video is over, I guarantee your opinion is going to shift, or get stronger. Either way, you're going to feel something. So stay with me. Okay, let's rewind the tape. Let's go back and look at what actually went down, because the way WWE and the mainstream wrestling media are telling this story, it is incomplete. And that incomplete version of events is being used to paint Drew McIntyre as the villain of this whole thing. Now Jacob Fatu. Let's start there. Because you cannot tell the story of Drew McIntyre's firing without talking about Jacob Fatu, and you cannot talk about Jacob Fatu without acknowledging what this man has become in WWE. Jacob Fatu is a monster. That's not an insult, that is a fact. He's a specimen. He's a second-generation Samoan warrior with the bloodline of wrestling royalty coursing through his veins, and ever since he debuted on the main roster, he has been absolutely terrorizing people. He's been a wrecking ball, a force of nature, and WWE has been positioning him as one of the most dominant physical forces in the entire company. Now, Drew McIntyre, the Scottish warrior, the chosen king, the man who headlined WrestleMania, has been at war. A prolonged, ugly, personal war. And it's the kind of war that doesn't end with a handshake. It's the kind of war that ends with someone getting hurt. And that's exactly what happened. The attack Drew McIntyre delivered to Jacob Fatu was, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was vicious. It was relentless. It crossed a line that even by pro wrestling standards, where violence is the language, felt like it went too far. Multiple weapon shots. Fatu left laying. The medical team rushing in. The entire locker room left stunned. It was the kind of moment where the arena goes quiet. Not because they're bored, but because they're genuinely shook. That silence you hear in the building when something real feels like it just happened? That was that moment. And Nick Aldis? Nick Aldis saw it. And he fired Drew McIntyre on the spot. Section 2, Nick Aldis. Let's talk about this man. Now here is where I need to slow down, because the conversation around Nick Aldis in this situation is not nuanced enough online, and I think that's a problem. On the surface, firing Drew McIntyre looks like Aldis doing his job. A man went too far. A man endangered another performer. The GM steps in, makes the call, restores order. Simple, right? Wrong. Because Nick Aldis did not just fire Drew McIntyre in a vacuum. He made a political decision. And don't let anyone tell you different. Think about this. Think about the timing. Think about who Jacob Fatu is connected to. Think about the power structures that exist in WWE backstage, and if you've been watching this product for more than 5 minutes, you already know that the bloodline's shadow stretches everywhere in this company. Roman Reigns built an empire. And even though that empire has fractured and shifted and evolved, there are still people in that locker room who benefit from being in that orbit. So when Drew McIntyre, a man who has never played the political game, a man who has always been an outsider, a man who came back from the absolute depths of his career to reach the mountaintop on his own terms, when that man snaps and goes full scorched earth on Jacob Fatu, who does Nick Aldis protect? Ask yourself that question. Who does he protect? He doesn't call in both men. He doesn't conduct an investigation. He doesn't look at what Fatu may have done to provoke this situation, and trust me, we are going to get to that in a moment. No, he fires Drew McIntyre. Immediately. Decisively, publicly. That is not justice. That is a message. And the message is, we don't care how big you are, we don't care how valuable you are, there are people in this company you simply do not touch. Section 3, what did Fatu do? The provocation nobody is talking about. Here's the part of this story that is being buried. And I mean buried. Mainstream wrestling outlets are glossing over this because it complicates their clean narrative of Drew bad, Fatu victim. Jacob Fatu is not an innocent man in this story. What has Fatu been doing for weeks leading up to this attack? He has been systematically dismantling people. He has been operating with a level of reckless aggression that should have had Nick Aldis in his office a long time ago. He has been leaving bodies. He has been crossing lines of his own. But nobody fired Jacob Fatu. Nobody suspended Jacob Fatu. Nobody even sat Jacob Fatu down and said, hey, dial it back. Because Jacob Fatu is protected. Because Jacob Fatu fits a narrative that WWE wants to tell right now. And Drew McIntyre watched all of that happen. He watched a man run roughshod over everything and everyone with zero consequences. And eventually, Drew McIntyre decided that if the system wasn't going to do something about it, he would. Now, is that the right call? Logically? Professionally? No. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Drew handled this the right way. He didn't. The attack was excessive. I won't pretend otherwise. But there is a massive difference between understanding why something happened and blindly condemning the man who did it without looking at the full context. And right now, WWE and Nick Aldis specifically is asking us to ignore the context. They're asking us to just accept the outcome without examining the journey that led there. And I refuse to do that. And you should too. Section 4, Drew McIntyre's legacy and why this is criminal. Let's talk about who Drew McIntyre is. Not the character, the reality. Because sometimes in wrestling, we get so caught up in the storyline that we forget there's a human being at the center of it. Drew McIntyre was released by WWE back in 2014. He was let go. He was told, essentially, that he wasn't good enough. That the vision they had for him hadn't worked out. And you know what he did? He didn't quit. He went to the independents. He went to TNA. He went to ICW back home in Scotland and he rebuilt himself from the ground up. He became something fiercer, something hungrier, something more real than what WWE had originally packaged him as. He came back. He earned his spot back. And then in 2020 in an empty arena, during one of the strangest and most painful periods in modern history, Drew McIntyre became WWE champion. He stood alone in that ring with no crowd, no pyro, no fanfare, and he held that title up and he cried. And if you watched that moment and you didn't feel something, you might need to check your pulse. This man has earned everything he has in this industry. Every scar, every title, every chant from the crowd. And Nick Aldis just threw all of that away with a 2-minute firing segment. Do you see why I'm angry? Do you see why this feels wrong? Because it's not just about what happened in that moment with Fatu. It's about what this decision means for a man who gave everything to get back to the top of this industry. Section 5, what happens next, the ripple effects. Now let's put on our analyst hats for a second, because I know you all come here not just for the emotion, you come here for the breakdown. So let's break this down. If Drew McIntyre is legitimately fired within this storyline, and yes, I understand the lines between fiction and reality in wrestling, but work with me here, what does that mean going forward? Option 1, Drew returns as a free agent. He shows up somewhere, maybe at a moment nobody expects, maybe at a premium live event, and he makes his return on his terms. No authority. No boss. No rules. An unchained Drew McIntyre is honestly a more terrifying prospect than any version we've seen before. This could be the beginning of the most dangerous chapter of his entire career. Option 2, this becomes a major catalyst for a broader power struggle storyline. Maybe other superstars start questioning Nick Aldis's decisions. Maybe there's a locker room revolt. Maybe Aldis's authority gets challenged from multiple directions, and this firing of Drew McIntyre is the match that lights the whole fire. Option 3, and this is the one that would make me absolutely lose my mind, Drew McIntyre comes back and he aligns with someone unexpected. An unlikely ally, someone who also has grievances with the current power structure. The possibilities here are endless, and honestly just thinking about some of the combinations makes me want to scream. Whatever direction this goes, one thing is certain, this story is far from over. Nick Aldis may think he ended something tonight, but what he actually did was create something. He created a Drew McIntyre with nothing left to lose. And that version of Drew McIntyre? That is the most dangerous man on the entire roster. Section 6, the fans, where do we stand? I want to talk to you directly for a second. If you're watching this, you're a fan. Maybe a casual fan, maybe a hardcore fan, maybe someone who's been watching wrestling since before Drew McIntyre was even born. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you care. You're here because you care. And I think the fan reaction to this moment is going to be one of the most interesting parts of this whole story going forward. Because wrestling lives and dies on crowd reaction, on fan investment, on whether people are emotionally connected to what's happening. And right now, right in this moment, Drew McIntyre is getting a level of sympathy and fan support that his character probably hasn't felt in a while. Because even if what he did was wrong, even if the attack on Fatu was excessive, fans understand Drew McIntyre. They've been on this journey with him. They know what he's been through. And watching him get fired, watching the establishment come down on him, triggers something in all of us who have ever felt like the system was rigged against us. That is powerful storytelling. Whether it was intentional or not, WWE has tapped into something real here. And I think the reaction you're going to see at the next live events is going to be electric. So I need you right now to tell me in the comments, whose side are you on? Drew McIntyre or Nick Aldis? Are you Team Drew, or do you think the GM made the right call? I read every single comment on this channel. Every one. So let's have this conversation. Outro, call to action. Look, here's the bottom line. Nick Aldis fired Drew McIntyre. And on the surface, maybe you think that was justified. Maybe you're watching this and you're on the GM side. That's fine. I respect that. But if this video did anything, if it made you see even one angle of this story that you hadn't considered before, then I did my job. because that's what Ring Rumble 1 is about. We don't just react, we analyze, we dig, we ask the questions that nobody else is asking, and we do it with passion because this industry deserves that passion. If you're new here, what are you doing? Subscribe right now. Hit that bell, because content like this drops regularly and you do not want to miss what's coming next. If you've been here a while, you already know. Share this video, put it in the wrestling groups, send it to your friends. Let's get this conversation going, because trust me, this Drew McIntyre situation is going to be one of the defining stories of this entire year in WWE, and you are going to want to be part of the community that was talking about it from day one. I'm out. But Drew McIntyre? He's just getting started.